Hello, everybody, and welcome to a presentation of CAN-SET version 7.2 program. Today, I'm going to have very short general characteristics of the program, and I will show you the newest functions available in version 7.1 and especially in version 7.2. My name is Michał Strzeszewski. I am from Suncom company, the software manufacturer company. From version 7.0, we have integrated in one application the three modules to design three systems in the buildings. So now it's possible to design central heating systems, also central cooling systems with ice-water pipe network, and internal water supply systems. And we can design all the systems in one design. So this is an example of a very small heating system, cooling system, and water supply system. When we are designing, normally it's more practical to observe one system at a time. However, sooner or later, it's good also to see all the systems at once to detect possible collisions. So here we can see the collision between the bath tube and a radiator. What's very important nowadays is that we can export the design systems to Revit applications. So on the left-hand side, you can see the water supply systems designed in CAN-SET program. And on the right-hand side, you can see the same system as already in Revit. And now a few words about the general methods of designing systems. In our software, we have the possibility to design systems on a diagram. So this is this traditional method, and it still may be useful. Some people like to use it, especially in case of the exchange or modernizing the existing systems. And the second method, more modern, it's designing on plan views. I recommend especially the second one because it's got a lot of advantages. In many cases, it's much faster, and also thanks to that, the program can prepare the full 3D model of the system. So we are speaking about designing on plan views because the designer draws the systems on the flat plan views rather than in 3D, because the drawing on plan views is faster and easier. However, the program later on creates the full 3D model of the building, and the third dimension is created automatically. And now let's speak about the new features. First, a little bit older ones shortly, so available in version 7.1 already. So the milestone was the axonometrical drawing, and these drawings are prepared automatically by the program. We design only the flat plan views, and the program creates the axonometry automatically. We only have to add the labels if we wish to have the labels attached to pipes, radiators, fan coils, etc. And then you can see the axonometry of just one story. The feature that is pretty important, though it seems pretty small one, it's synchronization of labels on repetitive stories. Because if you can imagine that very often the stories are repetitive, so similar, not necessarily the same. So when we add labels at one story, then we can very easily duplicate them to the others. But if we have this option on, so while we are rearranging the labels on one story, they are automatically rearranged on all the other stories. In this example, you can see only 2 stories to make it more clear, but of course, as you know, you can have 10, 15 or more stories. And this function indeed helps us to save a lot of time and also helps us prepare a clear, well-looking documentation. The other option introduced in version 7.1 was intelligent duplication, also downwards. Upwards existed before, but it occurs that very often it's useful also to duplicate downwards. And for example, when we decide on location of risers, very often it's more important the precise location on the ground floor and more important than the basement. So we can place the riser on the ground floor and just duplicate it downwards to the basement. The other option is showing the thickness of the pipes depending on the selected diameter. And as you see, this function works on drawings, also in the 3D visualization. And another pretty small option, but quite useful, is quicker access to layer properties, because our software, as practically, I suppose, all CAD software uses the technology of layers. So the appropriate elements are placed on the respective layers, and we can change the properties. For example, by default, the radiators are drawn yellow, but we can change this color. And to access the editor of properties, we can now just right-click an element, for example, a radiator, and then in the pop-up menu, we have the command layer properties. And this command opens the editor of layer properties, and we can change all the properties. The possibility of editing properties existed before. However, we had to look for appropriate layer on the list, and as we have about 100 standard layers, and the user can add more, so finding the appropriate layer could be a little bit problematic. Now with this function, just depending which element we click, this editor opens on the right layer. The other option, probably even more important, is showing the circuit through the receiver. That helps a lot during the diagnosis, during looking for problem solving. Just let's imagine that our system has got very high resistance, hydraulic resistance, pressure drop, and we try to find out why. So first we can turn on showing the critical circuit, and then we can just right-click the appropriate receiver in the critical circuit. And in the pop-up menu, now we have the new command, show the circuit through the receiver. And then the table with the results of the receivers opens, but opens at the right place, where the circuit through this element that we have clicked starts. And now, observing the delta P column, we can look for a guilty one, for a guilty element of the circuit. And in this way, we can localize the problem. The other option introduced in version 7.1 was the keyboard shortcuts. Now the user can define his or her own shortcuts. Here you can see just an example that, for example, for heating, it could be H, and then heating supply pipe HS, return HR, single pipe. If you wish to design single pipe system, it would be H1. And if you wish to draw the pair return supply and return pipe at once, so for a pair could be, for example, H2. That is just an example. Every user can define his or her own shortcuts, for example, 2 or 3 letters. And as you see, we have here a lot of tabs. It means that for all the graphical elements that are available in the program, you can define the shortcuts. And of course, you can say that it's not how our invention works also in other software, also in AutoCAD. But we believe that it's pretty useful. Therefore, we also introduced to our software. If you design a lot, you can really save a lot of time, because in case of clicking, very often you have to first click the appropriate tab and then the appropriate command. So we've got 2 clicks. And with keyboard, you can save. Of course, you can say that at once you save probably less than a second, just a fraction of a second. But if you design a lot, if you design big systems, at the end of the day, you can say that you saved 20 minutes or half an hour, for example, using that. Okay, and now the newest features. So the features that were introduced in version 7.2. So the current version of the software. First, the option that maybe you won't see it immediately, you would recognize it more when you come back to the previous version, that we have designed completely new graphics, 2D graphics module. Before, we are concentrating on the 3D visualization, also on axonometrical projections, and in the last time we decided also to refresh the 2D graphics module. Now the 2D plan views, I believe, look better and also work smoother. The other option is drawings. It's similar like a callout in AutoCAD. So in one drawing, you can show the part of the other drawing. So thanks to that, you will be more flexible in preparing technical documentation. And then the other, I like this word, this expression, selective selection. So you can be, while selecting the elements, you can be more selective. The idea is that if you select the system, you can, some parts of the system in the graphical window, you can decide which element you wish to be really selected. In this example, that element, this is radiators. So when we are drawing a window, selection window, indeed, only the radiators will be selected. In this example, there was just one type of elements. However, you can check more. So thanks to that, you are more flexible in selection, in deciding which elements should be selected. And because very often we use some, I would like pretty complex, I think pretty simple, but with complex consequences, operation on the selected objects. You can sort them, you can replace some elements, you can edit some data in the tables. So it's very important which elements you select. The other function, indeed it has existed for a long time, showing the critical circuit that I already mentioned today. However, now I think it's more clear, because when this option is on, all the other elements are lightened. So it's even more easy to notice which are the elements of the critical circuits. Because normally we won't work for a long time with this option. We usually turn it on to localize the critical circuit, to look for some problems, and then we switch it off. And so now it's more clear. Also, we extended the possibilities of showing the neighboring floors. And now we can see just our floor, but we can also see the previous one next, or we can see both at the time. Sometimes, for example, when localizing the risers, it could be important to see also what's happening, where are the walls in the other floors. It could be the floor below, but could be also over the specific floor. The other option is possibility to turn off the label display temporarily, because generally I believe that the labels are a very important part of the technical documentations, and I really encourage to use them. When I consult the designs, very often my remark is that there should be more labels, especially practically all the accessories, or majority of the accessories should have labels. Also, if you have manifolds, especially with underflow radiators, they also should have the labels that would show the presets on the valves. So for the final drawing, it's good to have labels. However, while observing, while analyzing the design, sometimes it could be more clear without them. So if you press this button, so you can sort of hide labels temporarily. So the drawings on the screen that looks more clear. So it works with labels and without labels. We don't delete them, we just hide them, and we can easily come back to see them again. The other option is useful when we decide to draw the plan view in our software. It's sometimes used because one option is to import the model from HL program, and therefore you would already have the model, and in the set program you won't need to draw walls. The other option is to use just AutoCAD plan views, and then the obligatory option is only to use the room zones. However, if you would prefer to have the full model in Auditor set and you don't use the model from HL, then you can also draw the models, these logical models, for example, drawing walls, in the set program. And this option shows you the possibility how to adjust the wall to what you can see in the plan view. And in the current version, we also extended the possibilities of designing the underfloor heating. And for that, I will be also using the live program, not only the presentation. Here you can see, for example, the possibility of joining the heating zones. If you select the heating zones, you can join them in one. So this is one possibility. The other possibility is to divide the heating zones. That happens especially when the pressure drop in the circuit is too high, or when the length of the pipe is too long, so you need to have shorter circuit. You can divide them, and we have a few possibilities. One is to divide into two parts or three, horizontally or vertically. The other more advanced is that we can use a polygonal chain, so we can divide the heating zones in a more complex way if necessary. So this is an example of a heating zone that we would like to divide into two. So first we have to select such a zone, so the program knows which zone we would like to divide. And then we activate the function of dividing by a polygonal chain. And then we draw such a chain. This is just an example. But just to show you that it can be a polygonal chain, not just a simple line. And then we just finalize the command. And as you see, we have two separate heating zones. Also, if you have a look at the heating zones with the coils, then you would see that they may have a little bit different color. The top one is more bright, it's more yellow. it means that this one is connected. And the other two are more gray. It means that we have the heating zone, but it's not connected to pipes yet. So now let me show you that in the program. Now so for example, this is an example of the small heating system and cooling and the water supply system that I would switch off majority. And I would switch also the previous drawings. Okay. And now, again, what you have seen already in the presentation, let me select the two heating zones. Selecting from the right to the left, like in AutoCAD, I can select the objects that are at least partially inside. So with such a small window, I can select two. And then if we go, because this option works not only for the underfloor heating zones, also for other polygons, also for room zones. So this is in just a second, excuse me. Yes, it's in this editing command, so it's more abstract because it's for different polygons. And this option is for joining. Join the selected polygons, and when I click it, as you see, we have just one circuit. Of course, we would have to correct now the connection. The other option is to divide it. So let me present you the dividing by a polygonal chain. So first, I should select the heating zone, or generally speaking, a polygon to divide. And now I can draw the maybe my example won't be the more logical from the construction perspective, but I just would like to show you the flexibility of the function. Now I have right-clicked, and here we can see the command and the possibility of executing this command or canceling if we change our mind. So let's execute it, and as you see, now I have divided my heating zone into two parts. The other possibility, this more quicker but less flexible, is to divide it just into 2 or 3 equal parts. So I select the other. In this case, I would prefer such a rectangular shape. And this option here cuts the polygonal and the polygon, and we have 4 options. We can cut it into 2 or 3 parts, vertically or horizontally. So, for example, that is the solution. And as you see, the first one from the right sort of inherited the connection. So it's connected, and the other two at the moment don't have the connection. So they are in gray. So we can easily see that we should correct that. All right, so let's come back to the presentation. And in version 7.2, we also continued with improvement of the DWG module. We already introduced before the newest DWG module that is much more flexible, much faster, and also accepts the DWG files from the newest versions of AutoCAD. However, the issue is that for our purposes, we really need the plan view of one story for each story, because as I already mentioned, we draw the plan views, we draw the systems on the plan views of the stories. So before, we recommended that we have a separate AutoCAD file for each story. However, as we observe the market, very often these drawings were available in such a way that we had all the stories in just one file. So it was necessary just to divide it. And to make it faster, now we introduce this new option that you can introduce into the set program, such a big drawings with all the stories. And then you can decide which part of such AutoCAD drawing to use at a specific location, at a specific story. And then you can copy it upwards with this intelligent application upwards and says that on the next story you would prefer another one. What is very important that in this case, because such an AutoCAD file is imported, and unless you delete it, it will be inside our file, a GRD file, and this file would be appropriately bigger. And it's important that if we have, say, 10 stories, we keep such an AutoCAD file only once, not 10 times. We keep it once, only the program knows which segment, which part of this file should be used in the appropriate story. Also, in case of importing AutoCAD files, this function can be useful. This is precise moving the objects. If you wish to move an object, you can use this option, and then you can very precisely place the vector of moving. You can use also the magnifying glass, so-called, Ctrl Q, and thanks to that, you can move the object very precisely. That can be useful when we are adjusting the plan views from AutoCAD on the stories. Because, as you understand, if we have just one file in AutoCAD with a lot of all the stories, so first we have to decide which part of AutoCAD file should be used in every story, but then we also have to coordinate them. So that is very easy, because we just have to find the one point, a common point, and with executing this command, we would place it appropriately. The other option is the narrowing the range of selected objects. As you already know, we used these techniques of tables in our software, and this technique is very useful because we can use a lot of operations that are, that seems very simple table operations, like looking for, sorting, looking and replacing, filling up, copying the parts of the table. So these are, from the table perspective, these are extremely, I would say, simple operations, but they are very powerful if you edit the properties of the elements of the system. Now it's even more flexible, because with axonometrical projection, you can select at once the elements on different stories, not just one story. So let me just show it as an example. This is, maybe let's change the proportion a little bit. This is axonometry. And let's say that I would choose the heating system mode. So I have the Now, if I select, I would select only the elements of the system, but let's choose, for example, cooling, that would be cooling, and then water supply. So depending which mode I am choosing, I would select the elements. And now, for example, I like to select the elements of water supply system, but only from 2 stories. So with axonometry, I can do that. And then, for example, I can have pipes, accessories, not many, in fact, and so on, just on these 2 stories. I can also press Ctrl A, so I have selected all possible elements. And these elements that I have selected are visible in the tables below, and I can now edit the properties. All these properties that are in the tables, I can now change if necessary. And now we have this new function of narrowing the range of selected, because first we select in the drawings and we obtain all these elements in the tables. Now, the second step is that we can select, for example, here 2 radiators in the table, and we have here these 2 new buttons in the right top corner of the table. And these 2 buttons, first one would say that only the elements that we have selected will remain in the selection. So, for example, here the radiators ANA were selected, and after clicking this button, we have now only the ANA radiators, and now we can continue work. The second button has the opposite function. It excludes the selected elements from the selection. It doesn't delete them, just exclude them. And as you see, after this function, we don't have the ANA radiators in the selection. So in the program, that would look, for example, maybe let's go to the receivers. And now I can sort, so we have the similar receivers close to each other. And for example, I would select this type of faucets, and I would say that I would like to work only with them. I would like to have only them in the selection. So first button, and it worked like that. The opposite function would be, okay, let's select the same. So as you see, maybe I have done it a little bit too fast. I have selected all the elements just with pressing Ctrl A. Ctrl L selects all, everything. Now I have run the sorting, so I have the same type of the elements close to each other. And now I selected these 3 faucets again. And with the second button, I will just exclude them from the selection. All the others are still selected, but these 3 faucets. So I invite you to our website, www.suncom.net, and then depending which language you prefer, you can select the appropriate language. Today we'll select English. And now you will see our website. I encourage you to have a look a little bit more precise at it. But at the moment, I would like to show you the functions of downloading. So first, you can download the trial versions. The trial versions have the full capacities. All the possibilities are not restricted. Only this is the time restriction. In case of the branded version, normally it's 1 month. And for this month, you can use the application tested, but also use it for commercial purposes. And here you can download, for example, our main version as auditor. For example, if you like set, so that would be auditor set. This is this brand name of the Suncom company. but you can also download trial version of CAN branded software, for example, CAN set, the newest one, 7.2. And also, what would be useful for you, you can use the sponsored software. So sponsored software is normally the software that is paid, but not by a user, but by a manufacturer of some elements used for the heating systems or other systems. And as you see, in case of the set program, it's possible to obtain the application, the sponsored version. It's sponsored by CAN company. And as you see, majority of them are for free. You just have to order it. And then, so you know how to obtain the program, also how to obtain the information. So the other command in the download menu is the multimedia. And now we try to explain how the program works, mostly in case of the films. Before it was rather the books, but it occurred that our programs are pretty complex, so these books were growing and had hundreds of pages. And as the users just ask us this option to use rather the films. So you can find here different films. Some of them are recordings of the webinars like today, and some of them are just specially prepared films. Some are the manuals that explain everything step by step. Some only discuss some very specific aspects. So now if you go to the help system, so the help system, in fact, it's very short because the majority of the help was moved to the films. So therefore, the main part of the manual now is just the contents of the video tutorials, and we have the links to the appropriate video tutorials that are just chapters of the help or manual. And these movies are technically placed on our YouTube channel, so you can access them, as already I have mentioned, from the website, from the help menu of the program, or you can go directly to YouTube. Our main channel is the SunComNet, but now we are preparing the separate channels for movies just in English and in Spanish languages and in other languages. So what you can use for the time being, you can go to playlists, and you have the playlist with the materials in English language if you would like to filter it and just to see what's in English, not in other languages.